They kicked me out at 18, but years later, they cried when they realized the house they moved into was actually mine. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. I still remember the night like it was yesterday. A silly argument about my plans for the future had escalated, and my parents decided it was easier to throw me out than to actually listen. I had nowhere to go, just a small backpack, a few clothes, and a heart full of frustration and hurt. At first, it felt impossible. I couch-surfed with friends, slept in cheap motels, and sometimes even just sat in the park when I had no other option. Every day was a struggle, but I knew giving up wasn't an option. I took any job I could find, waiting tables, cashier work, cleaning houses, and I saved every dollar I could. Every extra shift, every skipped coffee, every sacrifice was for one goal: to build a future I could control. Years passed, and slowly, life began to change. I started learning about investments, real estate, and smart ways to make money grow. It wasn't overnight, and there were moments I thought I would never succeed, but I kept pushing. I rented my first apartment, then bought a small property, then another. I made mistakes, but I learned from every single one. The little victories kept me going, and soon, I had enough to think bigger. That's when I spotted a house in the neighborhood where my parents had just moved. It was beautiful, perfect, and ironically, their dream home. Without them knowing, I made the purchase, signing the papers and quietly holding the deed in my name. A few weeks later, they were hosting a small gathering with neighbors, showing off the new house and bragging about how lucky they were. I waited for the right moment, walking up with a calm smile and introducing myself as the owner. The look on their faces was unforgettable. Shock, disbelief, and then tears. They stuttered, couldn't find words, and suddenly, all the power they once held over me seemed to vanish. I stayed composed and said simply, "Funny how life works." That line alone carried years of struggle, pain, and silent determination. I didn't yell, I didn't confront them aggressively. I just let the truth speak for itself. The real victory wasn't in making them feel small, it was in proving to myself that I could rise above the hurt, build my own life, and succeed on my own terms. Sometimes revenge isn't about bitterness or anger, it's about living so well that the people who doubted you finally see what they lost. That realization, more than anything, gave me peace. When I turned 18, they told me I was on my own. I didn't see them again for years. At first, it felt like the ground had disappeared beneath me. I went from a home full of rules and lectures to complete silence, and the loneliness was unbearable. No one seemed to care that I had nowhere to go. Every day was a struggle to figure out how to survive, but I knew I couldn't give up. I started working odd jobs, mowing lawns, delivering newspapers, anything that paid a few dollars. School became my anchor, and I worked hard, earning scholarships to keep going. There were nights I went to bed hungry, mornings I felt exhausted before the day even began, but slowly, the small wins added up. I saved, I learned, and I built a routine that kept me moving forward. Eventually, I started a small business, something simple at first, but with dedication, it grew. For the first time, I felt the satisfaction of creating my own life, independent of the people who had abandoned me. Years later, I heard through a mutual acquaintance that my parents were in trouble. Their finances were crumbling, and they were desperate to sell the house they had always bragged about. I felt a strange mixture of pity and determination. This was my chance, not for revenge, not to humiliate them, but to prove to myself how far I had come. I bought the house anonymously, keeping my name off every public record. It was ironic, buying the place they had always dreamed of, quietly reclaiming something that once felt unattainable. When they moved in, they were unaware of who truly owned the house. They bragged to neighbors, celebrated with friends, and felt proud of their new life. I waited for the right moment to reveal the truth. The day came, and I walked through the front door, calm and steady. Their faces went pale, eyes wide with disbelief, and then fear. They didn't know what to say, their confident smiles vanished instantly. I looked at them and felt nothing but clarity. I didn't do this to hurt you, I thought to myself. I did it to prove I could. That thought alone carried years of struggle, rejection, and quiet determination. I didn't shout, I didn't show anger. I simply let the reality speak for itself. They had built their pride on the idea that I would fail, and in that moment, I silently showed them the truth. The satisfaction wasn't in seeing them shocked, it was in realizing how much I had grown. I had survived alone, built a life from nothing, and claimed success on my own terms. Life had handed me every reason to be bitter, but I chose to let my achievements do the talking. True victory wasn't revenge, it was the proof that I could rise, despite the people who had given up on me. They always said I'd never make it, and they didn't even invite me to graduation. That day, I felt the sting of being left out, the sharp reminder that they didn't believe in me. I moved out at 18, determined to prove them wrong. I took a job in retail, working long hours and saving every penny I could. The work was hard, exhausting even, but I refused to let their doubt define me. Slowly, I began climbing the corporate ladder, learning everything about business, leadership, and strategy. Every promotion, every achievement, felt like a small victory over the negativity I had grown up with. Years went by, and I finally felt secure. I had a stable career, savings, and the freedom to make my own choices. Around the same time, I learned my parents had bought a luxury home. They bragged about it constantly, posting pictures, inviting neighbors over, and acting like life had finally treated them right. I listened quietly, a plan forming in my mind. I decided to buy the same house, but under a company name so they wouldn't suspect a thing. The paperwork was completed discreetly, and the ownership was mine. The day I chose to reveal it was calm and intentional. I visited them under the guise of a friendly meeting. As they opened the door, excitement and pride written all over their faces, I simply smiled and mentioned casually, "Funny, isn't it? This place has been mine for a while." Their smiles froze, confusion washing over them. They stammered, unable to find words. I stayed composed, letting the silence do the work. The embarrassment, the realization of their mistake, unfolded naturally, and I didn't need to say more. It wasn't about yelling, or making them feel small. My satisfaction came from the calm confidence I carried, from knowing I had achieved what they never thought I could. The house, the luxury, the quiet revelation, all of it was a testament to how far I had come on my own. They had always tied success to appearances, to money, to pride. I had tied it to independence, to skill, and to determination. In that moment, I understood a simple truth: financial independence is more powerful than any argument, any insult, or any judgment. My parents' words, once heavy with doubt, no longer mattered. I had proven myself, not by hurting them, but by creating a life they couldn't ignore, a life they had once dismissed. And that, more than anything, felt like the ultimate victory. The people who should have supported me turned their backs instead. I grew up surrounded by neglect and harsh words, always feeling like nothing I did was enough. My parents criticized every choice, dismissed every dream, and made me feel small, even in my own home. By the time I turned 18, I knew staying would only hold me back. I packed my things and left, stepping into a world that was scary and uncertain, but at least it was mine to face on my own. The first months were brutal. Rent was high, jobs were scarce, and every day felt like a battle just to survive. I worked multiple jobs, dishwashing, delivery, anything that paid, never complaining, always pushing forward. Some nights I wondered if I had made a mistake leaving, but giving up was never an option. Slowly, I found ways to stretch my money, invest wisely, and learn skills that would help me in the future. Each small success felt like a tiny victory over the life I had been forced to leave behind. As the years went by, I started investing in real estate. I bought small properties first, learning the market, understanding the risks, and building my portfolio quietly, without anyone knowing. It was satisfying to see my efforts grow, to know that I was creating something lasting from nothing. Eventually, my investments allowed me to own multiple homes, and I found a sense of security and pride I had never felt with my family. One day, I heard that my parents had moved into a new house. I checked the records quietly and realized with a mix of irony and satisfaction that the property they had chosen was one I already owned. They had no idea, of course, and went about their lives thinking they had finally made a good choice. I waited until the moment felt right, then visited them. When they discovered the truth, panic and desperation flashed across their faces. They begged for help, confused and overwhelmed, while I stayed calm and composed. I didn't need to shout or scold them, the truth itself was enough. In that moment, I realized something important. Revenge isn't about humiliating people or seeking payback. True satisfaction comes from self-respect, from proving to yourself that you can rise above hurt, neglect, and doubt. I had left home alone, struggled, and built a life that no one could take away. That pride, that sense of accomplishment, felt stronger than any anger or resentment. Life had finally given me the validation I needed, not through their approval, but through my own strength and perseverance. My best friend's family took me in, but my own parents? They didn't care. I still remember the day I turned 18 and they told me I had to leave. No support, no guidance, just cold words and a slammed door. I felt abandoned, like the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally had given up entirely. For a moment, I wondered if I would ever find a place where I belonged. Luckily, my best friend's parents welcomed me without hesitation. Their kindness gave me a lifeline when I needed it most. I focused on school, worked part-time jobs, and slowly started to build a life of my own. College was tough. I balanced classes, work, and paying my own bills, but I refused to let my past define me. Every challenge became motivation, every setback a lesson. By the time I graduated, I had a small savings, valuable skills, and a clear vision for my future. After college, I started working in marketing, gradually climbing the ladder and building my career. Along the way, I also learned about investments and began putting money into real estate. It was slow at first, but I was determined to create stability and security for myself, something my parents had never offered. Over the years, I acquired several properties, each one a small symbol of my independence and hard work. One day, I discovered my parents had moved into a new home, not far from one of my properties. The idea sparked a plan. I orchestrated what seemed like a casual, chance meeting, arriving at their neighborhood to run an errand. They welcomed me warmly, unaware of the truth. When the moment was right, I revealed that I was the owner of the house. Their faces went pale, and confusion mixed with shame as they realized what had happened. I didn't shout or lecture them. I stayed calm, letting my confidence speak for itself. The embarrassment they felt contrasted sharply with the pride I carried inside. Years of betrayal and neglect had fueled my determination, and now they could see the results. I had survived, grown, and succeeded on my own terms. In that moment, I understood something important. Betrayal can be painful, but it can also be a powerful motivator. The people who doubted me, abandoned me, or failed to support me only made me stronger. I didn't need revenge in the traditional sense, I just needed to rise, build my life, and prove to myself that I could. That triumph, that quiet but undeniable success, felt far more satisfying than anything else. Life had handed me a hard lesson, but I had turned it into a path for growth, independence, and confidence. I didn't scream. I didn't call the cops. I just let life do its job. That's what I kept telling myself the day my parents kicked me out at 18 over one of our usual trivial arguments. It wasn't new, they always picked fights about small things, but that day they decided they were done with me. One moment I was in my room, and the next I was standing outside with a bag of clothes and nowhere to go. The first months were harsh. I worked night shifts at a gas station, then early mornings at a warehouse. I slept in cheap rooms, saved whatever I could, and kept my head down. I didn't complain, didn't call home, didn't ask for help. I learned to survive quietly, turning every bit of pain into motivation. Soon, I discovered investing. It started small, a few dollars here and there, but over time, I understood how money worked. I saved aggressively, made smart choices, and little by little, my situation changed. Years later, I saw my parents online bragging about their dream home. Pictures of fancy furniture, big windows, and smiling faces filled their profiles. The same people who threw me out were now showing off their success like nothing had ever happened. Instead of reacting with anger, I stayed silent. I looked up the property and saw it was for sale. Without hesitation, I bought it through a trust, keeping my name completely hidden. They had no idea the house they were flaunting so proudly wasn't really theirs. A few weeks after they moved in, the truth slowly reached the neighborhood. A couple of neighbors figured out who the real owner was and spread the news. My parents heard it from them, not from me. Their proud posts stopped. Their smiles faded. They were embarrassed, confused, and suddenly quiet. I didn't say a word. I didn't show up to confront them. I let the situation unfold naturally. Eventually, they contacted me, their messages filled with shaky apologies and forced politeness. I read them, but I didn't respond right away. I didn't need to. The point was never to hurt them directly. It was to show that anger isn't the only answer. Sometimes patience and strategy speak louder than shouting ever could. Knowing they had unknowingly bragged about a house I owned was enough. Knowing life had brought things full circle without me lifting a finger felt even better. I didn't need revenge in the loud, dramatic way people imagine. My silence, my growth, and my success did the work for me. And in the end, it proved one clear truth: staying calm and focused is far more powerful than any outburst of anger. They said I was a failure. I laughed, but silently. I'd heard those words from my parents more times than I could count. They told me I wasn't going anywhere in life, that my dreams were unrealistic, and that I needed to wake up. So at 18, I walked out with nothing but determination. I started working at a small diner, taking double shifts, cleaning tables, and learning to survive on my own. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and it gave me the independence I craved. During slow hours, I would sit in the back with my phone and study anything I could about real estate. Videos, books, online courses, whatever I could find. The more I learned, the more I realized I had a chance to build something bigger than the life I came from. I saved my tips, cut unnecessary expenses, and little by little, I built enough money to make my first small investment. It wasn't much, but it was mine, and that feeling kept me going. As the years passed, I bought more properties, always making careful decisions and thinking long-term. My parents had no idea. They still assumed I was stuck in the same place they left me, struggling and directionless. Then one day, I heard through a distant relative that my parents had bought a beautiful home in a neighborhood that sounded oddly familiar. When I checked, I realized it was right next to one of my properties. Their pride in that house was loud. They talked about it online, bragged to friends, and showed it off like it was a trophy. I watched quietly, waiting for the right moment. A few months later, the house suddenly went up for sale again due to a financial issue they didn't expect. They didn't know I was watching from the sidelines as I prepared to make my move. I bought the house quietly, under a separate entity, and waited. The day came when I decided to reveal the truth. I walked over, knocked on their door, and they greeted me with surprised smiles, clearly not expecting to see me. They talked about the house, their plans, their pride. When I finally told them I owned it, their faces shifted instantly: shock, confusion, embarrassment all at once. They stood frozen, unable to understand how the daughter they once called a failure had climbed so high without their help. I didn't rub it in or raise my voice. I simply stood there, calm and steady, letting the reality sink in naturally. Their reactions were enough. I felt a quiet satisfaction, not because I wanted to hurt them, but because I knew I had built something strong and stable on my own. In that moment, I understood something clearly: success is sweeter than revenge. I didn't need to humiliate them. I just needed to live my life, work hard, and prove, mostly to myself, that I could rise above everything they tried to make me believe. At 18, I lost them. At 28, I found my power. Ryan used to repeat that line to himself whenever life felt too heavy. He grew up feeling like an outsider in his own home, unwanted and unimportant. When he finally left at 18, he carried nothing except determination. No guidance, no support, no warm goodbye, just a quiet promise to never let his past decide his future. He started with small jobs, working late shifts and saving every possible penny. He didn't complain, and he didn't look back. Instead, he tried to understand himself better. He learned how to manage his emotions, how to stay patient, and how to grow without bitterness. He took online courses, studied whenever he had free time, and slowly built skills that could help him build a better life. Ryan eventually found a job where he could learn more and earn enough to support himself comfortably. He stayed focused, avoided unnecessary arguments, and kept improving. Over the years, he turned into someone calm, thoughtful, and steady, someone he wished he had been allowed to be at home. By the time he turned 28, he had built a quiet kind of success. Not flashy, not loud, but stable. He had invested carefully and taken smart risks. One of those decisions led him to buy a house in a peaceful neighborhood. It wasn't just a property, it was a symbol of how far he had come. What he didn't expect was that his parents would choose the same neighborhood for their new home. They talked about it with excitement, telling other people about their fresh start. What they didn't know was that the house they were celebrating was the one Ryan already owned. He listened quietly when the news reached him. He didn't rush, didn't plan a dramatic moment, didn't dream of proving anything. He had learned too much about peace to let old wounds control him. When the time finally came, Ryan visited them with calm steps and an even calmer heart. There was no anger in his voice, only steady truth. He simply explained that the house they were moving into belonged to him, and that he had purchased it long before they ever considered living there. His words were plain, but they carried years of growth. His parents looked shocked, then regretful. They didn't say much at first. Maybe they remembered the boy they had pushed away. Maybe they realized how much he had achieved without them. Ryan didn't need their apology. He didn't ask for explanations. He had learned to find peace within himself, not through their approval. Standing there, he felt no desire to argue or remind them of the past. He had grown beyond it. Their reaction didn't feel like victory, his calmness did. His stability did. His inner strength did. He walked away with a quiet heart, knowing that life had come full circle. True revenge didn't shout. It didn't break things. It didn't demand anything. It simply looked like a man standing tall, unbothered, and finally free. Hey besties, new story up on our channel. Follow the link below. They didn't want me in their life, now they're living in mine. Lily whispered this to herself sometimes, not out of pride, but out of disbelief at how life can twist in unexpected ways. She had been pushed out of her home when she was young, left to navigate the world without guidance or a place to return to. The pain was heavy back then, but it slowly shaped her into someone stronger than she ever imagined. She started her life from zero, working full-time wherever she could find a chance. She learned how to manage money, how to stay disciplined, and how to keep going even when she felt alone. Over time, she saved enough to invest bit by bit. She didn't take huge risks, just smart, steady steps. Every little gain mattered. Every new skill she learned added to her confidence. Lily became financially stable much earlier than she expected. She was careful with her choices and never felt the need to announce her success. Her quiet nature became her strength. She studied different markets, bought properties when the timing was right, and made sure each decision helped her move forward. One of the homes she bought wasn't special on the outside, just a regular property in a peaceful area, but to Lily, it was part of her long journey toward independence. She didn't think much about it until she heard that her parents had purchased a new home, in the exact same area. And the house they chose was the one she already owned. When she first found out, she didn't feel the rush of revenge or the sharp bite of old pain. Instead, she felt a strange calmness. Life had brought her back to a place she never expected to stand again, above the hurt, above the anger, above the girl who once cried alone. She didn't plan a dramatic reveal. She didn't imagine confronting them with loud words. She had outgrown that. Instead, she decided to meet them casually, like two strangers catching up by chance. She kept the conversation normal and simple. They talked about the neighborhood, about the house, about their attempt at a fresh start. They had no idea who really owned it. Then Lily mentioned it quietly, as if it were just a small detail. She told them the house was hers, bought long before they decided to move in. She didn't change her tone. She didn't add emotion. She just said it the way someone might mention the weather. The reaction was immediate. Her parents froze, their expressions shifting from confusion to disbelief. The embarrassment settled on their faces slowly, like they were trying to understand how the daughter they pushed away had become the person standing calmly in front of them, someone they underestimated, someone they didn't know at all. Lily didn't feel satisfaction from their discomfort. She simply felt clarity. She had moved forward while they had stayed the same. She didn't need to raise her voice or remind them of the past. Her life itself was the reminder. Walking away, she realized something important: quiet intelligence will always be stronger than loud anger. And sometimes, the softest truths hit the hardest. They laughed at me when I was 18, now the neighborhood is crying with them. Jack never forgot those words or the way his parents used to say he would never amount to anything. Back then, he was just a teenager trying to understand life, trying to find his place while dealing with constant ridicule at home. Nothing he did was ever enough. Every mistake was a joke to them. Every dream he shared was dismissed. When he finally left home at 18, he carried nothing but determination. He took whatever job he could find, minimum wage, long hours, heavy work. None of it scared him because he knew it was only temporary. He wasn't looking for fast success or shortcuts. He just wanted a chance to build something real. Slowly, his life started to change. Jack learned new skills, saved money, and invested carefully. He didn't tell anyone what he was doing. He kept his plans quiet, working step by step, believing that progress doesn't need noise. With time, he managed to turn those small beginnings into something stable. From one job to another, from one investment to the next, he built the kind of life his parents once claimed he would never have. Years passed, and Jack became someone they wouldn't recognize: confident, patient, and financially secure. His parents, meanwhile, loved showing off. They often bragged about their dream home in the neighborhood. They talked about it like it was a badge of honor, something that proved they had done well without him. They invited neighbors over, spoke proudly of their big purchase, and never imagined that the house wasn't truly theirs in the way they thought. What they didn't know was that Jack had bought the property quietly through a long-term investment deal. The house they lived in, the one they loved displaying to everyone, belonged to him. He didn't buy it out of spite, he bought it because it made financial sense. The connection to his parents was just a twist of fate. Jack didn't rush to reveal the truth. He waited for the right moment, not to hurt them but to finally show them who he had become. That moment came during a community gathering, a place where everyone from the neighborhood was present. His parents were once again boasting about their home, telling stories, laughing loudly, enjoying the attention. Jack chose a calm approach. He didn't call them out or embarrass them intentionally. He simply corrected a small detail when someone asked about the house's history. In a steady voice, he mentioned that the property had been under his ownership for years. He didn't raise his tone. He didn't look for reactions. He just stated the truth plainly. The silence that followed spread through the entire gathering. Neighbors were shocked. His parents stood frozen, their faces changing as the realization hit them. The pride they carried so easily suddenly collapsed in front of everyone. They weren't angry, they were ashamed, overwhelmed, and exposed by nothing more than the truth. Jack remained composed. He didn't smile, didn't gloat, didn't say anything more. He simply stood there as the person they never expected him to become. Walking away from that moment, he understood something deeply: revenge doesn't always come from anger or confrontation. Sometimes it comes from timing, patience, and hard work. And when the truth finally shows itself, it speaks louder than anything he could have said. For Jack, that was enough.